Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Weekly Poker Showdown brought to you by Party Poker. I'm your host, Jaime Staples, and this week we talk with an absolute legend of the game, a 16-year poker pro, and since I've gotten into the game, he's been at the top of it all. Limit Hold'em, No Limit Hold'em, Pot Limit Omaha, short deck tournaments. I mean, the guy just plays at the highest levels. Really inspiring guy, so I look forward to speaking with Ike Haxton. Joining me on the podcast today, we have a guy that's had success at the very highest stakes when it comes to tournaments and cash games. A 16-year career, I learned today coming into the show. That's pretty good, Ike. Ike Haxton, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here. 16 years sounds like a long time. I feel old.
So I wanted to ask you to kick off here, 16-year career and playing at the highest levels. When I got into poker, you were already a high-stakes player when it came to tournaments and cash games. So I wanted to ask you, like, what were the skill sets? What do you think the most important skill sets are that you have that led you to have success over those 16 years?
I think the biggest thing is like knowing how to learn, and that's something that I think I came into poker already strong at, because I had played chess seriously when I was younger, and then Magic the Gathering. So I had a lot of like experience and even training in learning how to play a game well, and it's something I've improved at over the course of my career as well. And I think just that facility for learning and knowledge about how to learn has really been the most important thing.
Right. Okay. And so let's say someone's really bad at learning how to learn, and I'm not talking about anyone specifically, perhaps me. How would you give advice if you're trying to pick up a new skill, or let's say poker? Like, how would you go about it today if you were just getting into the game to learn the game?
I mean, today, if you want to learn No Limit Hold'em for sure, and to a lesser extent now PLO as well, it's really all about solvers. You have to know how to study solver outputs and learn from that. All of the best players are doing that, and that's what you've got to be doing if you want to be competing at a high level in poker. Which is
Right.
not to say everybody needs to approach it that way. You can play poker for fun and or even professionally at smaller stakes without taking that approach. But if your goal is to get as good as you can get, there's no way around needing to study solvers.
Right. That makes sense. So, a lot of my audience that watches this podcast and watch Twitch and stuff, they're brand new to poker, right? So, like, even getting to the point where they can approach working on a solver is like an intimidating thing.
Oh, for sure.
Like it's a lot of work to get there. So for those people, would you advise them to like just stay the course and put in the work and consider it at some point, or jump right in at the beginning of their poker play?
I think a reasonable approach would be to start by trying to watch some videos or read some books or something like that will give you some idea of where to start. Just jumping into opening up PO Solver and just kind of winging it, if you're not experienced with that kind of thing, is going to be really hard. It's going to be hard to know where to start. And there's good material out there for beginners. Phil Galfon's Run It Once site is great. There's a bunch of really good content from guys I know well and respect a lot on there. And then there's good written stuff too. I'm not super up to date on what the best newest stuff is. I know Andrew Brokos has been writing some stuff about game theory oriented poker. I haven't read it yet, but I love Andrew, and he's a really bright guy who explains things well. I bet that stuff is good. There are a couple books by a guy named Will Tipton that I read some years ago. That this was, I think, before PO had really caught on, but he was very early in doing AI work on Heads Up No Limit, There's a book by Michael Acevedo. I can't remember the title of that, but I'd recommend that one as well, on AI-oriented approach to no limit hold'em.
Right.
There's a lot of great material out there. You can just kind of start looking around and see what clicks with you, what agrees with your approach to learning and makes sense to you.
Right. Makes sense. It seems like you've read most of these books and all these books. When it comes to your own learning, are you keeping up to date with all the new poker literature and like all of the new material coming out from training sites, or are you sort of at a point where you just get to work on solvers and you don't really have to consume what other people are writing or creating about the game?
Um, yeah, I'm doing more work on my own and with like a small group of peers, and less like reading the stuff that's out there and watching videos, I guess. But I do try to sort of keep aware of what is out there.
Right. Yeah, because my perception is like you're the guy that would be writing the books, but I was just curious if like you keep abreast of what people are thinking in the industry, anyways.
Yeah, I try to.
Yeah.
I don't watch every training video that comes out or read every book that's released or anything like that, but I mean, I spend all day every day thinking about poker and talking to poker players, so I keep abreast of what's going on, I guess.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Um, what sort of pitfalls for newer poker players? Again, like I'm gonna touch on just found party poker, just found the game, maybe in the first year or 2 years of their career. Like what typical pitfalls do you see with that type of poker player?
I mean, probably the biggest one is just poor bankroll management. It's not intuitive.
Mm.
Swings are bigger than you think they will be, and I think a lot of people who would otherwise have a shot go broke because they play too big and
Right.
don't think clearly and methodically about their bankroll management.
I think that's definitely the answer that I see the most. You touch on
Yeah.
intuitive there, and I would love to pick your brain if you think about, sort of the skill sets in poker and the ones that aren't intuitive. Because I think after you gain experience, you fall into some of these norms of play and they sort of make sense and they're easy. But
Yeah.
for example, like, let's say shoving all in with a king three, is like something that is really difficult to do if you're new to poker, right? It's not intuitive at all. So do you ever think about
Feels like a bad hand.
yeah, it's just like this isn't what I see on TV at all.
Right.
So what sort of skills in poker do you think are not intuitive and like poker players struggle to push the envelope because it plays against our psychology and who we are as humans?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Um, you know, maybe nearly 15 years ago, I read something that Phil Galfond wrote on 2+2 that really stuck with me on this kind of thing, which is that the emotional feedback that you get from plays is often not well tuned to the actual EVs you're dealing with. And those biases lead people to make a lot of mistakes. So for the clearest example is all kinds of things having to do with pot odds and large or small multiples of the pot are very unintuitive. Calling quarter pot on the river, you're supposed to lose like 80% of the time. If you're calling quarter pot and winning 22% of the time, you're doing a really good job. That's a really good call. And that doesn't stick intuitively for people. People don't feel like they're winning when they call and lose 78% of the time. And there are a lot of other plays that are like that too. Like there are certain spots where the best play is to overbet shove for 7 times the pot for value. And you almost never get called, and you feel silly because you have the nuts and you go all in for 7 times the pot, and 80% of the time they fold, and you feel like you've wasted your nut flush. And the actual calculus of the spot where getting called for 7 times pot, 20% as often as you would get called for 1 time spot is a big win. But it doesn't feel that way because you almost never get the outcome you're rooting for. So all of these spots where you make the best play and most of the time you don't get the outcome you're rooting for really mess with people's brains. And I think you have to really train yourself to think deliberately about the numbers involved, or the emotional feedback will really mess with you.
Right. That makes sense. I love poker at a high level for that reason. Like, you put me in the spot where it's just fun and inspiring. So when you were coming up in the game, like, was there a particularly big mistake that you made, or a failing you had to overcome to get to the heights that you got to?
Yeah, I mean, I've made a bunch of mistakes along the way. I mean, one big one was relatively early in my career. I made a bunch of foolish staking decisions and went nearly broke a few years into my career. I had a few $100,000, and I was like, well, I'm playing these 10K WPTs and they seem pretty soft. And there's my cat in front of the camera. That's not ideal. Pardon me. Sorry. Yeah. I was playing 10K WPTs on a bankroll of a few $100,000, which was not really very wise even doing that. But then I was like, well, these are great tournaments. I'll just stake all my friends too.
Right.
And now I've got a stable of 4 or 5 people I'm staking on like 50-50 makeup deals that I never considered really the details of how that math works out. And very quickly I ran a high 6-figure bankroll down almost to zero at like $100,000 and like 600K of makeup debt. And was that wasn't a good move. I kind of just got lucky and got bailed out, and some people started winning. But it's really easy to overextend yourself on bankroll if you're overestimating edges and not thinking carefully about how the variance actually works. Beyond that, there were a couple points where at the beginning of my career, I was primarily a limit hold'em player. In 2005, this will sound bizarre to most people listening today, but most of the action online was limit hold'em.
Right.
Tournaments were not that much of a thing. No limit hold'em was not that much of a thing. Other games, Pot Limit Omaha and stuff like that, were barely existed at all. There was a good bit of Limit 08 being played in addition. But yeah, I played almost exclusively Limit Hold'em, and I was okay at full ring Limit Hold'em. I was a lot better than my opponents, who were also no good. By today's standards, I was no good.
Right.
But I thought I was great, and I would occasionally play people heads up and get crushed. I was not up to par against heads up specialists at the time, and didn't realize it, and lost big chunks of my bankroll a few times playing people who were better than me heads up.
I think the skill set's really
I guess
interesting.
Those are the two big things: is overestimating yourself and underestimating variance are both good ways to lose a lot of money faster than you expected was possible.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like everyone falls into those sort of pitfalls to some degree, right? And some people
Oh
come
yeah,
out the other side and they learn from it. And that's just like part of getting better, I feel like, is failing hopefully small enough to where you survive.
for sure. You got to challenge yourself.
Yeah. So how do you know your edge, Ike? Like when let's say you're staking players today, or you're deciding whether to play a game yourself. I mean, maybe you don't have to worry about edge because you always have one. I don't know. That could be the case.
I've taken the worst of it plenty of times in the last few years.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. So like, how do you estimate where you stand amongst other people? Like, how do you come to that answer? Even for a new player, they're hopping in, they throw $100 online, and
Yeah,
their goal is to be profitable. Like, how
right.
do they know where they stand?
Well, it's really hard when you're starting out because you you don't know what you don't know. It's a
Mm,
really difficult situation. So I guess one big thing is to be fairly results oriented, even though statistically you're not going to get a big enough sample to know whether or not you're winning in large field $10 tournaments until you've played hundreds or thousands of them. Um, if you're not winning, maybe move down and play even smaller. And yeah, try to pay attention to mistakes you think your opponents are making. It's if you're not identifying things you think your opponents are doing poorly that you think you're doing better, then you don't have any reason to believe you have an edge. So you should be looking out for signs that your opponents are making mistakes, playing less well than you. You want to be able to regularly identify things you think your opponents are doing wrong.
right. Makes sense. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about poker industry here. I know something
Mm-hmm.
you're fairly outspoken about. So I look forward to picking your brain a little bit. We used to be teammates over at PokerStars, and now we
Yep.
find ourselves here at Party Poker. So I
Yep.
wanted to ask you, sort of like what's different now in your mind, finding yourself here as opposed to where you were in the past.
Yeah, it feels great to be a part of Party Poker. Early on when I was with Stars, I loved being a part of that brand as well. And I think the thing that Party today and Stars in 2012, 2014, when I started with them, the thing that the two brands have in common is a real focus on poker to the exclusion of other gambling and a real grounding in the poker community. Um, Poker Stars at at its heyday was a company founded by poker players with poker players at the top of the management structure,
Mm,
and things really started to go awry when the business people took over and you had people in charge who didn't feel that kind of connection to the community, didn't really know very much about the game, weren't friends with a bunch of poker players. And Party today has that same thing. We've got Rob in charge, who is a member of the poker community. He spends all of his time around poker tournaments and cash games and hanging out with poker players, and he's in touch with poker players with how the community feels.
mm,
And I think a lot of other poker brands underestimate the importance of that to their detriment. Uh, Poker really is a community and is a lifestyle for the people who take it seriously. And being in touch with that community means so much for running a site.
Right. Um, what do you think are the issues that we're facing, and not just Party Poker, but globally in the industry, moving forward? What sort of issues are we facing as we evolve?
Online poker is in a difficult spot. Numbers have been declining for a while, and it's kind of a lot of old legacy brands competing for their share of a shrinking pie at this point, and that's just a tough situation. And when it comes to some of the other sites, I think a lot of them are making the sad but potentially rational choice to shift their focus toward sports and casino, which are kind of more reliable, higher margin businesses. If you look at Stars, I mean, they're a publicly traded company. You can see their balance sheet. They're more of a sports book than a poker room today. And Party has other types of gaming as well, but I think our brand is really poker focused, and that makes a big difference.
Mm.
It makes a big difference in terms of delivering a fun and enjoyable and fair product for the players.
Right. It feels like there's hope with Party Poker. It's like I genuinely believe, speaking with Rob and Tom Waters and those guys, like they get poker, and like they're truly trying to drive it forward and push it forward, whereas the writing can feel a little bit more in the wall when it comes to other competitors out there. So it feels different.
Yeah. I agree. It seems like we have a management team in place who are willing to look past quarterly and annual bottom line to do something that's a little more community oriented, that is about maintaining a fun and healthy place to play the game that we love.
So I know you've worked with the fraud department recently in trying to buff up parties' defenses against automation and collusion. I know you can't talk about like the specifics, but what do you think about that sort of that area of focus going forward as we try and avoid people, basically cheating the games?
Well, yeah, it's a big problem. It is now the case that there are completely automated programs out there that play poker very well. And somebody can set up an account and set up this software and take money out of the games, not playing fairly. And that both ruins the fun and ruins the financial ecosystem to have a bunch of money coming out of the player pool and going to cheaters. So it's a really important target to do the best we can to counteract that. And I'm happy that Party Poker is taking that pretty seriously. Our fraud team has done pretty well in busting a lot of bot accounts and refunding that money to the player pool. And I think that's a really important part of running a healthy poker room today, is doing the best job that you can with that.
Right. I wanted to ask you about poker creators. So this one's obviously close to my heart. I've built a career around like being a creator on Twitch and YouTube. But I've seen in the past you have taken a fairly, I don't know, I would say like anti-creator stance when it comes to some sort of things, when it comes to YouTube and Twitch and stuff. So what do you think about this new era of people that are streaming games? I won't take it personally, but also YouTubers and vloggers at the table. What do you think about these signed pros, and like, where is the line when it comes to preserving what poker is and what it is that you do, but then also enticing a new generation of players?
Right. Yeah. I regret that I have come off as being anti poker content creator. I don't feel that way. I think that Twitch streaming and stuff like that is great, and it is a great way to connect with more casual players and bring new people into the game. I'm a professional poker player, but Magic the Gathering hobbyist, and I watch a bunch of Magic the Gathering Twitch content and that sort of thing, and I love that stuff. It's very entertaining, and I think it's really good, and people should be doing that. People should be watching it and enjoying it. I'm absolutely all for it. I think the one thing that I have been outspoken about in the past, and if there are other examples I'm forgetting, please remind me. But the one thing I kind of went on the warpath about was people live streaming from live cash games and tournaments. I think that having a camera at the table when you're playing in a casino, if you're not really careful about it, pushes some boundaries of both etiquette and game integrity. People having, a camera on the table that is, reading their whole cards, and maybe it's reading the cards coming off the deck as well. I think that's not so good. And even beyond the game integrity thing, I think people have a certain expectation of privacy when they are playing in a casino. Obviously, it's a public place. Your expectation of privacy is somewhat limited. Anybody could walk through the room and see you there.
Mm-hmm.
But all the same, I don't think that walking into a poker room should be de facto consent to have your face on YouTube.
Right.
So, the organized meetup games where people are going to see a content creator they like and they know what they're signing up for. They know that they're walking in to participate in somebody who's making a piece of media that they're going to publish. That's great. Everybody knows what they're signing up for, and I'm all for it. Some of the content that I've seen on YouTube, I think, doesn't respect that line. You see faces of random bystanders in that content all the time, and I don't love that. I think if you're playing a cash game in a casino, you should not have to expect that you might end up on YouTube while you're there if you haven't explicitly agreed to it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I agree with your take on it, actually, and I think sometimes people do cross the line. It's a slippery slope. I think without there being poker vlogs, I think poker is going to miss a large audience of people that would be interested in playing, because that's how people discover hobbies, especially the younger generation, through YouTube,
For sure.
through TikTok, what have you. But enforcing the privacy of individuals' faces and like that sort of information, sitting in front of a stack of $10,000 and their faces on YouTube, they might not want that privacy concern. knowing they're going to
Yeah,
be at the same casino. So uh, it seems like a difficult one for operators, but your stance
definitely.
makes more
Yeah.
sense to me now in regards to how you feel about it. So, yeah. Um, if you were the party poker boss for the day, one day you get to change something. What would you change?
Um, if I can just get like one fantasy change implemented, I'd
Mm.
love to see short deck tournaments.
Ooh, me
I,
too.
I've I've really enjoyed the short deck tournaments I've played at mainly at Triton events, I guess. Um, I think it's a really good tournament game. I didn't expect that when I started playing it. I thought it was going to be like kind of simple and just a lot of going all in, running out boards. Um, but as I've played more of it, I've really grown to love it, and I think that with all of the variable stack sizes and tournament considerations, ICM, all that, it actually makes for a really interesting tournament game, and I would love to see more of it played online.
Hmm. Awesome.
So
I
yeah,
like
that
that one.
that, that, that that's my one fantasy change if I'm in charge of party poker for a day and have the magic power to do what I want with the software. I think Rob would love for that to happen too, but the software challenges have turned out to be rather large with getting short deck tournaments
Oh, okay.
happening. I know he wanted to do it more than a year ago,
Hmm.
and it just hasn't quite come together yet.
Yep. I mean, maybe a million short deck, main event could be. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna float it into the universe and see if anyone says anything about it. Last question here for you, Ike. Thanks for taking the time today. But
my
16
pleasure.
years into your career, um, what do you look forward to accomplishing? Like, do you set yourself goals, or what are you working towards in your career?
Um, I don't set all that many goals. I just kind of like to stay on top of the game, stay current with what's going on, and whatever are the biggest games and the best opportunities, be ready to make the most of that. I guess recently that's involved learning a lot of new games for me. Um, for, you know, the first 4 or 5 years of my career, I played nothing but Limit Hold'em. And then for another 6 or 7 after that, exclusively no limit hold'em and a little bit of tournaments. And then I learned pot limit Omaha and was mainly a pot limit Omaha player for a few years. And then in the last 5 years, or really more like 3 years, I've really opened up to start playing a bit of everything. I've started playing all the different limit games in the live mix in Las Vegas. I thought that that Bobby's Room live mixed game was one of the highest stakes, best opportunities out there, and that I really ought to learn what I needed to learn to be able to play in it. And over the last few years, I've gotten there, and that's an accomplishment I'm really pleased with and proud of. And in the last couple of years, I've gotten to be a competent short deck player as well. And I've been able to play in these Triton tournaments and some cash games and things. And I'm at a point now where I feel pretty confident playing almost any format of poker and keeping up with that and learning whatever new games catch on in the future, I think is going to be a main goal of mine. I just want to be able to just see what the highest stakes games, best, most exciting opportunities are, and be able to go and play in those games. I
Right.
guess is my main goal these days.
Is there a stake level that is like, man, I wish I could play blinds that high? Is there like an ultimate threshold? Like I want to play like 100K big blind or something like that, you know?
Um, I mean, I've played some really big games, and at this point in my career, I have kind of a network of other professional poker players who I can sell action to
Mm,
if a really big game is happening. And um, pretty much any game that I can get a seat in, I can afford to play by virtue of selling action to
mm,
my friends. I've played in, like, I don't know, what's the biggest game the biggest game I've ever played is 50K, 100K Hong Kong dollar no limit, which is, like about 6,000, 12,000 USD. And I have a pretty tiny percentage of myself in
right.
that game, but I had the opportunity to play in it and was able to, organize selling pieces to my peers so that we could all take advantage of a profitable opportunity.
Right.
So there's not really much of a limit on the stakes that I could play from that perspective. Past a certain point, in terms of my bottom line, it's all kind of the same.
Right. That's pretty amazing, man. 6K, 12K USD. That's I can't imagine the feeling of that. It's got to be crazy. But
it went badly, and it felt pretty bad.
Thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. I look up to your success in the game. I know so many other people do as well. So keep doing your thing, man. Getting out there, crushing, playing the games. I think it's awesome, and I look forward to following up sometime in the future.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Big thanks to Haxton for taking time and coming on the show this week. Really appreciate that, and I look forward to following up again in the future. What a smart guy. I love this job. I love this podcast. I get to speak with smart people all the time and learn from them. It's awesome. I hope you all enjoy listening to it as well. Before I let you go this week, we have our weekly competition, #JSPokerHero. All you have to do is answer the skill testing question, and the closest to is going to win a $215 Party Poker Million ticket, and you're going to represent the podcast, try and win the tournament, okay? Now, last week's winner was at RL What's Crackin'. Guess closest to the 808 players that took part in Day 1A, the WPT Online Championship. At RL What's Crackin', guessed 812. So you win a 215 Party Poker Million ticket. Please do us strong, represent the podcast strong, go on and get second place in the tournament because I want to win it. Second place. Thank you. This week's competition, the guessing is last week's Party Poker Million paid out a huge $1.448 million prize pool. $1,448,000. That's a lot. What is the prize pool going to be this week? The nearest guess wins, and in the event of a tie, somehow, you can take it to cents if you want. The earliest answer wins. Deadline for entries is 7 p.m. UK time this Sunday. Use the hashtag JSPokerHero. You can tag me as well. I like to see your guesses too. It's cool. At Jaime Staples. Thank you all so much for listening to the show this week or watching. If you're on iTunes, please give us a rate and review. It really helps us out in a ranking on the iTunes algorithms. Spotify, you just do your thing. You don't have any jobs, Spotify. You just chill out, man. YouTube, like, subscribe, drop a comment. That would be awesome. Thank you all so much for taking the time this week. But until next week for a very special edition of the Weekly Poker Showdown. We'll see you later.